In a typical psychological thriller in all the films I've analysed, each one had a male villain and a female princess who played the victim. Each one not only contained the two specific to character types, villain and princess, but in each film, the villain was specifically male and the princess was specifically female. Each film also lacked focus on any of the characters or character types. For example, it is typical for a psychological thriller to lack a helper character to represent how severe the situation is. Our opening sequence includes only these two characters of these genders and some animals. We use the female to take advantage of the fact that females are often considered more vulnerable and therefore the audience normally relates to them more. The villain is male to conform to the stereotype that they are intimidating and emotionless, to make his actions seem instinctive and unpredictable. This helps to highlight how the isolated victim or princess is and makes the audience feel like she is doomed. The mise-en-scène conforms to the typical psychological thriller codes and conventions. To contrast the typical unfamiliar situations and characters the audience come across in a psychological thriller, the location is typically more familiar to them to force them to empathise with the situation. In our case, we use the location of a farm, a kitchen and a living room for the male's narrative. For the female princess's location, we use a bedroom which appears to be well kept and tidy. The costume for the male also conforms to the stereotypes as he is well presented and kept to juxtapose his opposing state of mind. The female's costume conforms to the fact that it sexualizes her, creating the representational issue that women are the subject of crime because of the way they dress, suggesting it is their fault. However, the minimal clothing also represents her as the victim again, creating empathy towards her, conforming to the codes and conventions of the psychological thriller genre. When we chose our title, we considered the fact that it is a code and convention of a psychological thriller film to have a one-word or a two-word phrase as the title, for example, Gone Girl, Black Swan, or Seven. This is usually because it doesn't give too much away about the narrative of the film, however, it is significant within the narrative. Therefore, we decided to go with Carmen. The name doesn't give anything about our narrative away, however, once you have watched the film, it becomes apparent that the villain's deceased daughter was called Carmen, and that's his motive for this abduction. Also, the way we displayed our title in our opening sequence was consistent with the films we have analysed. We put our title into our sequence at the end as the climax of tension. The title was simple, typical thriller font and white on a black background, conforming to the codes and conventions of the genre. A stereotypical film follows Todorow's narrative theory, conforming to the order-disorder-order model. However, our opening sequence utilises a fragmented narrative which challenges this model. There are two separate narratives, the female princesses and the male villains, which are cut into each other. These narratives come together once at the end of the opening sequence. Therefore, this challenges the stereotypical chronological narrative. This narrative also begins in media res and begins with disorder, again challenging this model. Furthermore, it is typical of psychological thrillers to have a hostile situation, e.g. kidnap or murder, that the police are working towards trying to find out who the villain is. In these cases, it is common for the audience to also not know who the villain is or to be misled towards who they think it could be. However, in our opening sequence, our audience meets the villain straight away. In the opening sequences I analyse for psychological thrillers, the credits are always vertically integrated onto the bottom of the screen. These can either be just placed on top of an image or placed on top of a black screen. These credits are also typically white and given in a specific order. Although our credits are in the typical order, they are integrated differently. They are integrated so that they appear to be revealed under and inside of certain objects in the frame. For example, when someone picks up a cup, the credits will appear to have been under the cup. This is for the purpose of symbolism, that things aren't as the audience may seem. They are being hidden and things are going to be revealed throughout the narrative. The sound effects used in the first half of the opening sequence are supposed to be what the female princess can hear in her dreams. Therefore, not what the male can hear, but it is disorientating for the audience as they are unsure as to where it is coming from at first. The lack of diegetic dialogue also challenges the codes and conventions of the stereotypical thriller film. Dialogue is normally used throughout the whole opening sequence to set the tone and suggest the initial disorder. However, our sequence only uses the dialogue from the female to say, "Good morning, Daddy," again to create enigma around the situation to the audience. The lack of dialogue from the male is atypical because the dialogue is typically predominantly from the villain, as the audience learn his intentions and confirm their thoughts that he is the danger and the threat. We decided to develop the fact that a zoom out can represent the audience's distancing themselves from a character. For the whole first half of the narrative, the camera zooms out from the female character's face. We decided it would be significant to include this into our opening sequence, as we purposely tried to make it seem to the audience that everything was fine in the beginning, so it develops to reveal something is wrong. This can be a symbolism for that this, as it suggests that the audience is so close to her at first, they think they know the real her and everything is okay. However, as it zooms out and the audience get further away, it symbolises the fact that they know less than they ever thought they did. This is reinforced by the rope they see on the wrist as they zoom out, as they were initially oblivious to. The match of action was added to add to the enigma around the two characters' relationship. The match of action suggests that there is a bond between the two characters, however this is challenged by the fact that they're walking in opposite directions across the screen. This represents the fact that they've been forced together but are completely separate from each other.